The Korthak fleet moved through the void like a swarm of deadly insects, their black hulls absorbing starlight as they approached the edge of what the galaxy called human space. Admiral Zektar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Crusher, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. 300 warships under his command, each one a masterpiece of Korthak engineering and brutality. "Admiral," his communications officer hissed through razor-sharp teeth, "we are receiving automated warnings from the humans. They claim this is their territory and demand we turn back immediately." Zektar's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. The Korthak had conquered 17 star systems in the past decade. They had crushed the peaceful Zilani, enslaved the technologically advanced Kirill, and wiped out 3 entire species that dared to resist. Humans were just another obstacle to be removed. "Ignore their pathetic warnings," Zektar commanded, his forearms gesturing dismissively. "These soft-skinned mammals think they can intimidate the Korthak Dominion with words? We have studied their species for months. They are weak, divided among themselves, and lack the killer instinct necessary for true warfare." The bridge crew chittered their agreement. Intelligence reports showed that humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. They seemed more interested in trade and diplomacy than conquest. Their military appeared scattered across dozens of colony worlds with no central command structure. Perfect prey for the Korthak war machine. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "our scouts have identified their first line of defense. 3 orbital stations around a mining colony called Kepler 442b. Each station appears to have minimal armament and skeletal crews." Zektar studied the holographic display showing the human outpost. The stations looked almost primitive compared to Korthak fortress worlds. No massive plasma cannons, no particle beam networks, no swarms of automated defense drones. Just simple metal structures with what appeared to be basic kinetic weapons. "How many humans are we detecting on these stations?" Zektar asked. "Approximately 50 per station, Admiral. Perhaps 150 total defenders for the entire system." The bridge erupted in predatory sounds of anticipation. 150 humans against 300 Korthak warships? It would be over in minutes. The Korthak lived for battle, bred for conquest. Each warrior aboard these ships had trained from birth to kill and destroy. Their weapons could crack planets, their shields could withstand stellar flares. "Begin the attack," Zektar ordered. "Show these humans what happens when inferior species block the path of the Dominion. Take the stations intact if possible. I want prisoners for the slave markets." The first wave of Korthak fighters screamed toward the human stations, their pilots eager for an easy victory. Zektar watched with satisfaction as his forces closed the distance. Soon the galaxy would know that human space was just another conquest for the mighty Korthak. But something was wrong. The human stations weren't responding as expected. Instead of panicking or attempting to flee, they were waiting. The defenders seemed calm, almost relaxed. Radio chatter intercepted from the stations showed humans cracking jokes and discussing their dinner plans. "Admiral," the communications officer said, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "The humans are transmitting again. This time it's different. Put it through," Zektar commanded. A human voice filled the bridge, speaking in accented but clear galactic standard. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Network. You have exactly 30 seconds to reverse course and leave human space. This is your final warning." Zektar's mandibles clicked again, but this time with irritation rather than amusement. The audacity of these creatures. 150 defenders challenging 300 warships? Respond to them. Tell them they have 30 seconds to surrender before we turn their stations into space debris. The human response came immediately. "Negative. You have 20 seconds now." "Sir." The tactical officer's voice had an edge of concern. "Our fighters are reporting strange energy readings from the human stations. Their sensors are picking up massive power signatures that don't match our intelligence reports." Zektar leaned forward, studying the display more carefully. The human stations did appear to be generating unusual amounts of energy, far more than should be possible for structures of their size. But that was impossible. Korthak intelligence was never wrong. These humans were supposed to be primitives. 10 seconds, came the calm human voice. "Admiral, should we recall our fighters?" the tactical officer asked. Zektar's pride would not allow retreat. The Korthak had never backed down from inferior opponents. Maintain attack formation. These humans are bluffing. What could they possibly do against the might of the Dominion? The countdown reached 0. What happened next would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. The 3 human stations suddenly blazed with light brighter than stars. Massive energy beams lanced out across space, moving faster than anything in the Korthak arsenal. The first wave of fighters simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that their atoms were scattered across light years. But that was just the beginning. The stations began to transform, unfolding like deadly metal flowers. Hidden weapon systems emerged from what had appeared to be simple cargo bays. Missile launchers rose from the surface, each one larger than a Korthak corvette. Point defense systems that could track and destroy objects moving at significant fractions of light speed powered up along every surface. Impossible, Zektar roared. Our intelligence showed these were mining stations. His communications officer was frantically working his console.
Sir, I'm receiving updated data from our long-range scouts.
Those aren't mining stations. They're fortress worlds, heavily armed military installations disguised to look like civilian infrastructure. The human voice returned, no longer patient or diplomatic. You were warned. Now you face the consequences of your arrogance. Welcome to human space, where we've been preparing for visitors like you for 200 years. More energy beams flashed across space. Korthak ships that had seemed invincible moments before were cut in half by weapons that operated on principles the Dominion scientists didn't even understand. The mighty Korthak fleet, terror of 17 star systems, was being systematically dismantled by 3 stations crewed by 150 humans. Zektar watched in growing horror as his forces were destroyed with clinical efficiency. These weren't the weak, divided mammals his intelligence had described. These were apex predators who had been waiting patiently for someone foolish enough to test their defenses. The Admiral finally understood that the Korthak had made a terrible mistake. They hadn't stumbled across easy prey. They had invaded the territory of something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined, and this was only the beginning. Admiral Zektar gripped the command console with all 4 arms as another Korthak destroyer exploded in a brilliant flash of light. His flagship shuddered under the impact of nearby detonations. In less than 10 minutes, he had lost nearly a third of his fleet to what he had believed were simple mining stations. Sir, we're receiving an incoming transmission, his communications officer reported, his voice trembling with fear that no Korthak warrior should ever display. From the humans, Zektar demanded. No, sir. From High Command. Admiral Vexkoth himself. The main screen flickered to life, showing the scarred face of the Supreme Admiral of the Korthak Dominion. Vexkoth had conquered more worlds than any military leader in their species' history. His reputation alone could make entire star systems surrender without firing a shot. Zektar, Vexkoth's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Our long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from your location. Report your status immediately. Zektar felt shame burn through his carapace. Supreme Admiral, we have encountered unexpected resistance. The human defenses were not as intelligence reported. We have suffered heavy casualties. Vexkoth's expression shifted from annoyance to genuine concern. Define heavy casualties, Admiral. 97 ships lost in the first engagement, sir. The humans possess weapons technology far beyond our current understanding. Silence filled the communication channel. In the background, Zektar could hear the sounds of battle as his remaining ships fought desperately against the human defensive network. The 3 stations had been joined by additional platforms that seemed to materialize from empty space, their cloaking technology superior to anything the Korthak had ever encountered. Admiral, Vexkoth finally spoke, his voice carrying a deadly calm. You are telling me that 3 human outposts have destroyed nearly 100 Korthak warships? Yes, Supreme Admiral. Their weapon systems appear to be based on directed energy principles we have never seen before. They can target multiple ships simultaneously, at ranges that exceed our own weapons by orders of magnitude. Another explosion rocked the bone. Crusher as a human torpedo somehow penetrated their shields and detonated against the hull. These weren't the simple kinetic weapons Korthak intelligence had reported. These were sophisticated guided projectiles that seemed to think for themselves, adapting to defensive countermeasures in real time. Vexkoth leaned forward, his 4 eyes narrowing. What do you know about these humans, Zektar? What did our intelligence gathering actually uncover? Zektar accessed his data files. his claws clicking nervously across the console. According to our reports, humans achieved faster than light travel approximately 200 years ago. They have established colonies on 47 worlds. Their government appears to be a loose confederation with no central military authority. They prefer trade and diplomacy to warfare. And yet they are currently destroying a Korthak battle fleet, Vexkoth observed coldly. The tactical display showed another wave of human missiles approaching. These weapons moved unlike anything in the known galaxy, changing direction at impossible angles, accelerating beyond what physics should allow. The Korthak point defense systems, designed to handle conventional threats, were completely overwhelmed. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting massive hyperspace signatures approaching from deeper in human territory." "Multiple fleets, sir. They're coming from at least 6 different directions." Zektar felt his stomach drop. Reinforcements. Of course the humans would have reinforcements. No species would leave their border defenses without backup, especially not one that had survived in the hostile galaxy for 2 centuries. "How many ships?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "I'm reading. By the ancestors. Sir, I'm detecting over 2,000 vessels. They're maintaining tight formation and approaching at maximum hyperspace velocity." Vexkoth's image flickered as the communication was interrupted by another impact. When the signal stabilized, the Supreme Admiral's expression had changed to something Zektar had never seen before. Uncertainty. "Zektar, you will implement emergency extraction protocols immediately. I am authorizing the use of quantum torpedoes if necessary to clear your escape route." Quantum torpedoes were weapons of last resort, capable of cracking planets. Their use was restricted to only the most desperate situations. The fact that Vexkoth was authorizing them meant that the situation had escalated far beyond a simple territorial dispute. "Sir," Zektar's communications officer interrupted, "the humans are transmitting again." "Put them through," both admirals said simultaneously. A new human voice filled the channel, older and carrying absolute authority. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Defense Force. You are currently engaged in unprovoked hostile action against human territory. You have 30 minutes to cease all aggressive activities and prepare for surrender negotiations." Vexkoth's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "They want us to surrender? After we initiated the attack?" Admiral Webb continued. "Be aware that you are now facing the combined might of 6 human fleets. Your technological disadvantage is significant. However, we are prepared to discuss terms if you stand down immediately." "Admiral Webb," Vexkoth transmitted directly, his voice dripping with disdain. "I am Supreme Admiral Vexkoth of the Korthak Dominion. We have conquered 17 star systems. We do not surrender to anyone, especially not to mammals who learned to fly between stars only yesterday." The human's response came without hesitation. "Supreme Admiral, your species has made the mistake of believing that age equals wisdom. You have also made the mistake of assuming that new players in the galaxy are necessarily weak players. Both assumptions are about to cost you dearly." The tactical display suddenly showed the approaching human fleets dropping out of hyperspace. 2,000 ships materialized around the battlefield like a closing fist. These weren't the simple vessels Korthak intelligence had reported. These were ships that defied classification, their hulls incorporating technologies that shouldn't exist, their weapon signatures unlike anything in the galactic database. "By the ancestors," Zektar whispered. "What are we facing?" Admiral Webb's voice returned, no longer diplomatic. "You're facing a species that spent 200 years preparing for this exact scenario. While you were conquering primitive worlds, we were studying every aggressive species in the galaxy. We learned from your victories, analyzed your tactics, and designed our entire military doctrine around defeating enemies exactly like you." The human fleets began to move, their formations precise and coordinated. It was immediately clear that these ships worked together with a level of integration that the Korthak had never achieved. Each vessel seemed to know exactly what every other ship was doing, as if they shared a collective consciousness. "You see," Admiral Webb continued, "humans have a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We hoped we would never need these fleets. We prepared them anyway." Vexkoth realized with growing horror that the Korthak Dominion had not invaded the territory of a weak species. They had stumbled into the carefully prepared killing ground of apex predators who had been waiting patiently for someone foolish enough to test their strength. The human fleets moved with a precision that defied everything the Korthak understood about space warfare. Instead of the chaotic swarm tactics favored by most species, the human ships flowed like liquid mercury, each vessel perfectly positioned to support its neighbors while maintaining optimal firing angles. Admiral Zektar watched in growing amazement as his sensors revealed the true scope of what they faced. The ships weren't just coordinated, they were networked. Each vessel shared targeting data, power distribution, and tactical analysis in real time. When one ship's shields weakened, neighboring vessels automatically adjusted their positions to provide covering fire. When weapons overheated, the entire fleet redistributed targeting responsibilities without missing a beat. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, voice filled with awe. "Their ships are operating as a single organism. I've never seen anything like it." Supreme Admiral Vexkoth's image flickered back online. "Zektar, what is your tactical assessment? Can we break through their formations?" Before Zektar could respond, Admiral Webb's voice filled the communication channel again. "Supreme Admiral, I'm going to save you some time and bloodshed. Your ships cannot penetrate our formations because we designed our entire tactical doctrine around fighting enemies who think like you do." A holographic display materialized between the opposing fleets, showing a detailed analysis of Korthak battle tactics from their previous 17 conquests. Every strategy, every weakness, every predictable response was laid out in exhaustive detail. "For the past 50 years, Admiral Webb continued, we've studied every conflict you've been involved in. We know that you favor overwhelming frontal assaults. We know that you rely on individual ship superiority rather than fleet coordination. We know that you've never faced an enemy who could match your technological capabilities." The display shifted, showing human ship designs that incorporated defensive systems specifically tailored to counter Korthak weapons. Their armor was layered to dissipate plasma charges. Their shields rotated frequencies to negate particle beam weapons. Their hulls were constructed from materials that could absorb and redirect energy attacks. "You see," Webb's voice carried a note of what almost sounded like sympathy, "you made the mistake of following a predictable pattern. Every species you conquered was either technologically inferior or caught off guard. You never faced an enemy who had time to prepare and the resources to implement comprehensive countermeasures." Zektar felt something he had never experienced before. Genuine fear. Not the adrenaline rush of combat, but the deep, cold realization that his forces were outmatched in every conceivable way. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "I'm detecting additional human signatures approaching from hyperspace. They're massive, sir, unlike anything we've ever seen." The new arrivals dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. These weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were mobile space stations, each one the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could crack continents. Fortress ships that dwarfed anything in the Korthak fleet. "Allow me to introduce you to humanity's Dreadnought-class mobile battle platforms," Admiral Webb announced. "Each one is capable of single-handedly defending an entire star system. We have 12 of them positioned along our borders." The implications hit Zektar like a physical blow. If humans had 12 such platforms defending their territory, how many ships did they actually possess? How extensive were their defenses? The intelligence reports had suggested a scattered collection of lightly defended colonies. The reality was a military infrastructure that rivaled the great galactic powers. "This is impossible," Vexkoth transmitted. "No species achieves this level of military sophistication in only 2 centuries. "You're thinking like a Korthak," Admiral Webb replied. "You assume that military power comes from conquest and domination. Humans understand that military power comes from preparation and cooperation." The tactical display updated again, this time showing the human colonial network. What the Korthak had interpreted as scattered settlements were actually carefully positioned strategic nodes. Each colony was located to provide mutual support to its neighbors. Supply lines were protected by multiple redundant routes. Industrial capacity was distributed to prevent single points of failure. "Every human colony doubles as a fortress," Webb explained. "Every civilian facility can be converted to military production within hours. Every citizen receives basic military training. When you decided to invade human space, you didn't just declare war on our military, you declared war on our entire civilization." As if to demonstrate his point, the sensors began detecting additional ships emerging from the civilian colonies throughout the system. cargo vessels that suddenly sprouted weapon pods, mining ships that revealed hidden missile launchers, even passenger liners that transformed into fast attack craft. By the ancestors, Zektar whispered. Every ship they build is a potential warship. Now you're beginning to understand, Admiral Webb confirmed. Humans don't maintain a military separate from their society. We are a military society that happens to engage in peaceful activities when no one is threatening us. The remaining Korthak ships found themselves completely surrounded. Every direction of escape was blocked by human vessels. Every tactical option had been anticipated and countered. They were trapped in the middle of a kill zone designed specifically for enemies who fought exactly like they did. Supreme Admiral, Zektar transmitted to Vexkoth. I recommend immediate withdrawal. We are facing a level of opposition that exceeds our operational parameters. Withdrawal? Vexkoth's voice carried disbelief. The Korthak Dominion does not retreat from inferior species. With respect, sir, these are not inferior species. We have severely underestimated human capabilities. Admiral Webb's voice cut through their transmission. Supreme Admiral, you have approximately 2 minutes to make a decision. My orders are to minimize casualties while protecting human territory. However, those orders have limits. If you continue to resist, I will demonstrate exactly why no species has successfully invaded human space in 200 years. The human fleets began to move into attack formation. The precision was terrifying. Not a single wasted motion. Not a single redundant maneuver. Each ship knew exactly where it needed to be and when it needed to be there. Sir, Zektar's sensor operator called out. The human weapons are powering up. Energy signatures are off the scale. These aren't the same weapons we faced at the stations. Fleet-grade weapons, Zektar realized. They've been holding back. The station defenses were just the beginning. Supreme Admiral Vexkoth stared at the tactical display showing the hopeless situation his forces faced. For the first time in his military career, he was looking at a battle he could not win through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. The humans had removed both options from the equation. 1 minute, Supreme Admiral, Admiral Webb announced. Choose wisely. Supreme Admiral Vexkoth's 4 eyes stared at the tactical display, watching as human ships moved into perfect attack formations around his trapped fleet. In his 3 decades of military command, he had never faced a situation where surrender was the logical choice. The Korthak Dominion had built its reputation on never backing down, never showing weakness to enemies. But this wasn't about reputation anymore. This was about survival. Admiral Webb, Vexkoth transmitted, his voice carrying the weight of defeat. What are your terms? The response came immediately, as if the human had been expecting this moment. Immediate cessation of all hostile activities. Your weapons will be powered down, and your ships will maintain current positions. Any vessel that attempts to flee or engage will be destroyed without further warning. Zektar watched as his own crew looked to him for guidance. These were warriors who had never experienced defeat. Soldiers who had been raised believing in Korthak supremacy. The idea of surrender was foreign to their very nature. Sir, his weapons officer asked quietly, what are your orders? Before Zektar could respond, Admiral Webb's voice filled the channel again. I want to be clear about something, Supreme Admiral. This isn't just about your current fleet. Our long-range sensors have detected additional Korthak forces massing at the edge of our territory. 3 more battle groups if our intelligence is correct. Vexkoth felt his mandibles click involuntarily. How did the humans know about the reserve fleets? Those forces were positioned days away from any human colonies, hidden in supposedly unmonitored space. You seem surprised, Webb observed. You shouldn't be. Did you really think you could mass over 1,000 ships near our borders without us noticing? We've been tracking your fleet movements for weeks. The main display shifted, showing a 3-dimensional map of the local star systems. Red indicators marked every Korthak vessel within 50 light-years of human space. The scope was staggering. Not only did the humans know about the main invasion force, they had identified every scout ship, supply vessel, and reserve unit in the entire region. This level of surveillance is impossible, Vexkoth protested. No species has sensor networks with that kind of range and precision. You're still thinking conventionally, Admiral Webb replied. You assume that sensors have to be mounted on ships or stations. You never considered that an entire star system could be turned into a sensor array. The display updated again, this time showing the human colonies in detail. What the Korthak had identified as mining operations, Communication relays and research stations were revealed as components of a vast detection network. Every asteroid miner was also a passive sensor platform. Every communication satellite doubled as a surveillance post. Every scientific probe carried military-grade detection equipment. 50 years ago, Webb continued, humans made a strategic decision. We realized that in a galaxy full of aggressive species, our survival would depend on seeing threats coming long before they reached our borders. So we built the most comprehensive early warning system in galactic history. Zektar stared at the display in growing amazement. The humans hadn't just prepared for invasion. They had made invasion impossible through sheer technological superiority. Any enemy force would be detected, tracked, and analyzed long before it could pose a threat to human territory. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, "if they've been watching us for weeks, they know everything about our capabilities, our numbers, our supply lines, and our weaknesses," Zektar finished grimly. Admiral Webb seemed to hear their conversation. "That's correct, Admiral Zektar. We know that your fleet is operating at the extreme edge of its supply range. We know that your reserve ammunition is running low after your conquest of the Kuril homeworld. We know that your ships haven't undergone major maintenance in over 6 months. The precision of their intelligence was terrifying. How could the humans know details about Korthak logistics that were classified at the highest levels? The conquest of the Kuril had indeed depleted their ammunition reserves, and the extended campaign had pushed their maintenance schedules beyond recommended limits. We also know," Webb continued, "that the Korthak Dominion is facing internal political pressure. Your recent conquests have been expensive, and there's growing opposition to continued military expansion among your civilian leadership." Vexkoth felt his carapace flush with shame. That information was known only to the highest levels of the Dominion government. If humans had intelligence sources that deep within Korthak society, then they understood their enemy far better than the Korthak understood them. "How?" Vexkoth demanded. "How do you know these things?" "Because we've been studying you for 50 years, Webb replied simply. "Every species in this galaxy that shows aggressive tendencies becomes a subject of interest to human intelligence services. We know your military doctrine, your political structure, your economic capabilities, and your cultural weaknesses." The tactical display shifted again, showing detailed profiles of other species throughout the galaxy. The Vectari Empire, the Sleth Confederacy, the Mordak clans, every major military power was represented with comprehensive intelligence files. "You see," Webb explained, "while you were busy conquering primitive worlds, we were preparing for threats we hadn't even encountered yet. We studied every aggressive species within 200 light-years of human space. We developed countermeasures for their weapons, defenses against their tactics, and strategies to exploit their weaknesses. But why?" Zektar found himself asking. "Why prepare for conflicts that might never happen?" "Because humans understand something that most species don't," Webb replied. "Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is what happens when potential aggressors realize that the cost of war exceeds any possible benefit. The human fleets maintained their perfect formations, weapons charged, but not firing. They radiated controlled lethality, the promise of overwhelming force held in check by disciplined restraint. Supreme Admiral," Webb continued, "you have 3 choices. First, you can surrender your current forces and negotiate a peaceful resolution to this conflict. Second, you can attempt to fight your way out and be destroyed along with every ship under your command. Third, you can call for reinforcements and discover exactly why no species has ever successfully invaded human space." "And if we choose surrender?" Vexkoth asked. "Then you and your crews will be treated according to galactic conventions regarding prisoners of war. Your ships will be impounded but not destroyed. Your personnel will be housed in comfortable facilities while we negotiate your return to Korthak space. And in return, the Korthak Dominion will formally recognize human territorial boundaries and agree to a non-aggression pact. Your government will also provide compensation for the damage caused by this unprovoked attack." Zektar realized that the humans weren't just offering terms of surrender, they were offering a way for the Korthak to save face while backing down from an unwinnable conflict. It was more generous than any terms the Dominion had ever offered to defeated enemies. "You could destroy us completely," Vexkoth observed. "Why offer mercy?" "Because humans prefer to make friends rather than corpses," Webb replied. "Dead enemies teach no lessons to those who might threaten us in the future. Living enemies who understand the futility of aggression can become valuable allies. The Supreme Admiral looked at his tactical display one final time, seeing his proud fleet surrounded by forces he could never hope to defeat. The choice was clear, even if it violated every instinct bred into Korthak warriors over countless generations. Admiral Webb, Vexkoth transmitted, his voice heavy with the weight of historical precedent. The Korthak fleet surrenders. The surrender of the Korthak fleet sent shockwaves across the galaxy that reached far beyond the immediate battle zone. Within hours, every major intelligence service in known space was analyzing the engagement, trying to understand how a species barely 2 centuries old had so decisively defeated one of the galaxy's most feared military powers. Admiral Zektar found himself aboard the human flagship Indomitable, a vessel that defied every assumption he had made about human engineering. The ship's corridors were wider than necessary, the lighting was softer than standard military specifications, and the crew moved with an efficiency that suggested extensive automation support. He was escorted to a conference room where Admiral Webb waited with several other human officers. Up close, the humans appeared even more unremarkable than their intelligence files had suggested. They were smaller than Korthak warriors, lacking natural weapons or armor, with soft skin that seemed vulnerable to even minor damage. Yet these same creatures had just dismantled a battle fleet that had terrorized 17 star systems. Admiral Zektar, Webb greeted him with what appeared to be genuine courtesy. "Please sit. I imagine you have questions." Zektar settled into a chair that had been modified to accommodate his larger frame, another small sign of human attention to detail. "I need to understand," he began. "Your species achieved faster-than-light travel only 200 years ago. How is it possible that you've developed military capabilities that exceed ours by such a wide margin?" Admiral Webb exchanged glances with his staff before responding. "That's a fair question, and the answer reveals something fundamental about how humans approach challenges. We didn't develop superior military technology because we're naturally warlike. We developed it because we're naturally paranoid." A human officer with colonel's insignia activated a holographic display. "When humanity first entered the galactic community, we quickly realized that we were surrounded by species with thousands of years of technological development. We were the newcomers in a neighborhood full of potential threats." The display showed a timeline of human expansion into space. Unlike the aggressive, rapid conquests typical of species like the Korthak, human expansion had been methodical and cautious. Each new colony was heavily defended before the next was established. Each technological advancement was immediately shared across all human worlds. "We made a strategic decision early on," Webb continued. "Instead of trying to match the technological level of established species, we would exceed it. We committed enormous resources to research and development, focusing specifically on defensive capabilities." "But how did you advance so quickly?" Zektar pressed. "Even with unlimited resources, technological development takes time." Colonel Sarah Martinez, the officer operating the display, smiled grimly. "That's where human nature became an advantage. You see, Admiral, humans have a unique trait among galactic species. We're collaborative to an almost obsessive degree." The display shifted to show the internal structure of human research networks. Instead of the compartmentalized, competitive research typical of most species, humans had created vast collaborative networks where every scientist, every engineer, every researcher shared their work freely with colleagues across dozens of worlds. "When a researcher on Earth makes a breakthrough in energy systems," Martinez explained, "that information is immediately available to weapons designers on Mars, shield engineers on Titan, and defensive specialists on Alpha Centauri. We don't just avoid reinventing the wheel, we improve the wheel continuously across our entire civilization." Zektar studied the display with growing understanding. The Korthak approach to research was typical of most species. Individual scientists or small teams working in isolation, hoarding discoveries for personal advancement or national advantage. The human approach eliminated all redundancy while maximizing innovation. "This is why your technological advancement seemed impossible," Admiral Webb said. "You were measuring our progress against species that develop technology competitively. We develop technology collectively." "But that doesn't explain your military doctrine," Zektar objected. "Your fleet coordination, your tactical integration, that level of unity takes decades to develop." "Actually, it takes about 6 months," Webb replied casually. Every human ship is controlled by artificial intelligence systems that share real-time data through quantum communication networks. Our ships don't coordinate, they're literally thinking together. The implications hit Zektar like a physical blow. The Korthak prided themselves on individual ship commanders making independent tactical decisions. It was considered a mark of honor for a captain to achieve victory through personal skill and courage. The idea of surrendering tactical control to artificial minds was anathema to their warrior culture. You're telling me that your entire fleet is controlled by machines? Zektar asked. Guided by machines, commanded by humans, Webb corrected. Our AI systems handle calculation, coordination, and communication. Human commanders make strategic decisions and set tactical priorities. It's the perfect combination of artificial precision and human intuition. Colonel Martinez activated another display showing the internal structure of a human warship. The level of automation was staggering. Systems that required dozens of crew members on Korthak vessels were handled by single technicians supported by AI assistants. Weapons that needed manual targeting were aimed by computers that could track thousands of targets simultaneously. This is why our ships seem to operate as a single organism, Webb explained. In a very real sense, they were. Every vessel in our fleet shares sensory data, tactical analysis, and threat assessment in real time. When one ship identifies a target, every ship in the fleet knows about it instantly. And this technology has existed for how long? Zektar asked. The basic systems have been in development for about 50 years. The current implementation was completed 18 months ago. Zektar felt his mandibles click involuntarily. 18 months. The humans had achieved a level of fleet integration in 18 months that the Korthak hadn't managed in centuries of military development. I need to understand something else, Zektar said. Your intelligence networks. How did you know so much about our operations? Admiral Webb's expression became more serious. That's where human paranoia really paid off. When we first encountered other species, we realized that our survival might depend on understanding our neighbors better than they understood us. The display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of the local galactic region. Colored threads connected human space to dozens of other star systems, representing information networks that spanned thousands of light years. We invested heavily in intelligence gathering from the very beginning, Webb continued. But not the kind of espionage you might expect. We approached it like scientists studying natural phenomena. We wanted to understand how other species thought, how they made decisions, how they approached conflict. You studied us like laboratory specimens, Zektar realized. We studied everyone like laboratory specimens, Webb confirmed. The Vektari Empire, the Sleth Confederacy, the Mordak clans. Every species that showed aggressive tendencies became a subject of anthropological study. We have teams of sociologists, psychologists, and cultural analysts who specialize in understanding non-human civilizations. Colonel Martinez brought up detailed files on Korthak society. The depth of information was staggering. Political structures, economic systems, military traditions, cultural values. The humans understood Korthak civilization better than many Korthak understood it themselves. This is how we knew about your supply problems, your maintenance issues, your political tensions, Webb explained. When you understand a species' culture and psychology, their strategic decisions become predictable. Zektar stared at the files describing his own people with cold, analytical precision. You've been preparing to fight us specifically. We've been preparing to fight everyone specifically, Webb corrected. That's the point. We didn't know which species might eventually threaten human space, so we prepared to defend against all of them. The scope of human preparation was becoming clear. While other species focused on conquest and expansion, humans had devoted their entire civilization to understanding and preparing for threats that might never materialize. They had turned defensive paranoia into the most sophisticated military doctrine in the galaxy. Admiral Webb, Zektar said slowly, I think my people have made a fundamental error in judgment about the nature of humanity. What kind of error? We assumed that because you were new to the galaxy, you were naive about the realities of interstellar politics. We thought your preference for diplomacy indicated weakness. Admiral Webb nodded thoughtfully. A lot of species make that mistake. They confuse our reluctance to fight with an inability to fight. Those are very different things. 3 weeks after the Korthak surrender, Admiral Zektar found himself in an unprecedented situation. Instead of being held in a prisoner of war facility, he was touring human military installations as part of what Admiral Webb called diplomatic education. The humans seemed determined to ensure that he understood exactly what the Korthak Dominion had attempted to challenge. The tour began at Luna Base, humanity's primary military academy located on Earth's moon. As Zektar walked through the training facilities, he observed something that challenged every assumption he had made about human military culture. "Your cadets are children," he observed, watching a group of young humans practicing tactical simulations. "They're 16 years old," confirmed Commander Lisa Park, his escort officer. In human society, military education begins early, but not in the way you might expect. The cadets were working through a complex strategic scenario involving the defense of a civilian colony against multiple attack vectors. What struck Zektar was not their tactical knowledge, though that was impressive, but their approach to problem-solving. Instead of competing for individual glory, they collaborated seamlessly, each cadet contributing their strengths to the group effort. Among the Korthak, young warriors compete against each other to prove their dominance, Zektar explained. The strongest rise to leadership positions through personal combat. Humans tried that approach for thousands of years, Commander Park replied. We discovered that cooperation produces better results than competition. These cadets aren't learning to dominate their peers, they're learning to enhance each other's capabilities. They moved to an advanced simulation chamber where senior cadets were facing off against historical scenarios involving various alien species. Zektar was amazed to see detailed recreations of Korthak battle tactics being used to train human officers. You've been using our own strategies to prepare your people, he realized. We've been using everyone's strategies, Park confirmed. Every significant military engagement in galactic history has been analyzed and incorporated into our training programs. Our officers learn to think like Korthak commanders, Vektari strategists, Sleth tacticians, everyone. Zektar watched as a young human cadet successfully predicted and countered a classic Korthak pincer movement. The simulation was so accurate that it felt like watching his own people in action. The cadet's tactical response was flawless, exploiting weaknesses that most Korthak commanders didn't even realize they had. This cadet has never faced Korthak forces in actual combat, Zektar observed. Correct, but she's fought against simulated Korthak forces thousands of times. Our training programs include perfect recreations of how every known species approaches warfare. By the time our officers graduate, they've fought and defeated every enemy they're likely to encounter. The implications were staggering. Human military officers weren't just trained in human tactics, they were trained in the tactics of every species in the galaxy. When they faced real enemies, those enemies were fighting opponents who already knew their every move. The tour continued to Mars Defense Station, one of humanity's fortress worlds. Zektar had expected a massive military installation bristling with obvious weapons. Instead, he found what appeared to be a thriving civilian city with subtle defensive modifications. "Where are your weapons?" he asked, looking at the peaceful urban landscape. Commander Park smiled and activated a control interface. The city transformed before Zektar's eyes. Building facades retracted to reveal massive gun emplacements. Parks and plazas opened to expose missile launch systems. The entire city was a weapon disguised as a civilian settlement. Every human world is both a colony and a fortress, Park explained. Our civilian infrastructure is designed to serve dual purposes. In peacetime, these are schools, hospitals, and research centers. In wartime, they become command bunkers, weapons platforms, and defensive strongholds. They visited a shopping mall that could be converted into a military command center within minutes. A university campus that doubled as a weapons research facility. A recreational park that concealed enough firepower to destroy an orbital battle fleet. This level of integration must be incredibly expensive, Zektar observed. Actually, it's quite cost-effective, Park replied. Instead of maintaining separate civilian and military infrastructures, we build everything to serve both purposes. It's more efficient and provides much better defensive coverage. Zektar began to understand why human defenses had seemed so unexpectedly formidable. The Korthak had planned their attack based on the assumption that they would face dedicated military installations. Instead, they had encountered an entire civilization that was simultaneously civilian and military. The final stop on the tour was the Titan shipyards, where new human vessels were constructed. Zektar expected to see massive military production facilities. Instead, he found something that looked more like a research laboratory than a shipyard. "Where are the assembly lines?" he asked. "Where are the workers?" "Mostly automated," explained Chief Engineer Sarah Kim. "Humans design the ships. Artificial intelligence systems optimize the construction process, and automated systems handle most of the actual building." The efficiency was remarkable. A single human engineer could oversee the construction of an entire warship, supported by AI systems that managed millions of individual components and assembly processes. The shipyard could produce vessels faster than traditional methods, while maintaining quality standards that exceeded anything in the galaxy. "How many ships can you produce?" Zektar asked. "Currently, about one new vessel every 6 hours across all our shipyards. But that's peacetime production. In a full war economy, we could increase that by a factor of 10. Zektar felt his carapace flush with shock. The humans could build ships faster than most species could crew them. If the Korthak invasion had succeeded in triggering a full-scale war, they would have faced an enemy capable of replacing losses faster than they could inflict them. "Admiral," Chief Engineer Kim continued, "I want to show you something that might interest you." She led him to a design laboratory where human engineers were working on new ship concepts. The holographic displays showed vessels that incorporated defensive systems specifically designed to counter weapons used by species throughout the galaxy. "These are anti-Vectari configurations," Kim explained, indicating one set of designs. "Heavy shielding against plasma-based weapons. These are anti-Sleth designs, optimized for fighting in asteroid fields and nebulae. And these," she gestured to another display, "are anti-Korthak configurations." Zektar stared at ships designed specifically to fight his own people. The armor configurations, weapon placements, and defensive systems were perfectly optimized to counter Korthak battle tactics. Even more disturbing, the designs were dated, from over a year ago, long before the Korthak had even considered invading human space. "You were preparing to fight us before we decided to attack." He realized. "We were preparing to fight everyone before anyone decided to attack us," Kim corrected. "It's cheaper to build defensive systems before you need them than to develop them during a crisis." As the tour concluded, Zektar found himself back aboard the human flagship with Admiral Webb. The scope of what he had seen was difficult to process. The humans hadn't just prepared for war, they had prepared for every conceivable form of war against every potential enemy. "Admiral Webb," Zektar said, "I need to ask you something directly. If the Korthak Dominion had committed our entire military to this invasion, every ship, every warrior, every resource, could you have defeated us?" Admiral Webb considered the question seriously before responding. "Admiral, the forces you encountered represent approximately 12% of human military capability. The fleets we deployed were drawn from border defense units. Our main battle fleets never left their home systems." The weight of that revelation settled over Zektar like a physical force. The overwhelming defeat that had shattered his understanding of military power had been inflicted by a small fraction of human capabilities. "We never had a chance," he said quietly. "No," Admiral Webb confirmed gently. "You never had a chance. But that wasn't your fault. You were operating on incomplete information, making strategic decisions based on intelligence that was designed to be misleading." "Designed to be misleading? Admiral, how do you think your intelligence services gathered information about human capabilities? Did you really believe that a species paranoid enough to build the defensive systems you've just seen would leave accurate military information where hostile intelligence services could find it?" 6 months after the failed Korthak invasion, Admiral Zektar stood before the assembled leadership of the Korthak Dominion in the grand chamber of their homeworld. The ornate hall, decorated with trophies from 17 conquered worlds, seemed smaller somehow, less impressive than it had before his encounter with humanity. Supreme Admiral Vexkoth sat at the center of the semicircular council table, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of authority that no longer carried the same weight it once had. Around him, the military and political leaders of the Dominion waited to hear Zektar's final report on humanity's capabilities. "Admiral Zektar," Vexkoth began, his voice carrying the formal tones reserved for official proceedings, "you have spent 6 months as a guest of the humans. The Council requires your assessment of their military capabilities and intentions toward the Dominion." Zektar activated the holographic display system, showing detailed analyses of everything he had observed during his extended stay in human space. The first image showed the true scope of human military infrastructure, not the scattered, lightly defended colonies that Korthak intelligence had reported, but a sophisticated network of fortress worlds, mobile battle platforms, and automated defense systems. Honored Council, Zektar began. Our intelligence estimates regarding human military capabilities were incorrect by a factor of approximately 50-1. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. General Kethvar, the Dominion's chief military strategist, leaned forward aggressively. Admiral, are you suggesting that our intelligence services were incompetent? No, General. I am suggesting that they were deceived. Systematically and deliberately deceived by an intelligence operation that spans decades and covers every aspect of human society that we were allowed to observe. Zektar changed the display to show the comparison between reported human capabilities and actual capabilities. The disparity was staggering. Where Korthak intelligence had identified civilian mining operations, the reality was military-grade sensor networks. Where they had seen scattered colony ships, the truth was heavily armed mobile platforms capable of defending entire star systems. The humans allowed us to see exactly what they wanted us to see, Zektar continued. Every piece of information our intelligence services gathered was carefully crafted to present humanity as a weak, divided species suitable for conquest. Impossible, declared Counselor Thexera, the Dominion's chief intelligence officer. Our sources within human space are extensive and reliable. Your sources, Zektar replied grimly, are controlled by human intelligence services. Every informant, every data intercept, every intelligence asset we believed we had developed was actually feeding us information provided by humans themselves. The chamber erupted in angry chittering. The idea that the mighty Korthak intelligence apparatus had been completely compromised was almost too humiliating to accept. Supreme Admiral Vexkoth raised all four arms for silence. Admiral, you are making extraordinary claims. What evidence do you have to support these accusations? Zektar activated a new display showing detailed communications intercepts from human military networks. The humans provided me with records of every intelligence operation the Dominion has conducted against their territory for the past 50 years. They knew about our agents before we recruited them. They knew about our surveillance networks before we established them. They have been managing our perception of their capabilities since the day we first made contact. The evidence was overwhelming. Messages between human intelligence officers discussing specific Korthak operations, planning documents showing how to feed false information to Dominion agents, training materials for human operatives on how to appear weak and disorganized while gathering intelligence on potential threats. They have been studying us for 50 years, Zektar explained. Not just our military capabilities, but our psychology, our decision-making processes, our cultural blind spots. They understood how Korthak warriors think better than we understand ourselves. General Kethvar slammed his primary arm against the table. This is preposterous. Are you telling us that these soft-skinned mammals have been manipulating the Korthak Dominion for half a century? That is exactly what I'm telling you, Zektar confirmed. And they have been doing the same thing to every aggressive species in this region of the galaxy. The Vektari Empire, the Sleth Confederacy, the Mordak clans, all of them have been subjected to the same intelligence operations. The display shifted to show a galactic map marking every species that had been influenced by human intelligence activities. The scope was breathtaking. Nearly every military power within 200 light-years of human space had been systematically studied, analyzed, and prepared for. The humans call it defensive intelligence warfare. Zektar continued. Instead of waiting to be attacked and then responding, they identify potential threats decades in advance and begin preparation immediately. By the time we decided to invade their space, they had already been preparing to fight us for longer than some of our officers have been alive. Counselor Mordak, the Dominion's chief strategist, studied the display with growing alarm. Admiral, what is your assessment of human intentions toward the Dominion? Do they plan to invade our territory? No, Zektar replied immediately. The humans have no interest in conquest. Their entire military doctrine is defensive in nature. They want to be left alone to develop their civilization in peace. Then why build such overwhelming military capabilities? Demanded General Kethvar. Because they understand something that we do not. Zektar explained. True security comes not from the ability to defeat enemies, but from the ability to convince potential enemies that conflict is pointless. The humans have achieved perfect deterrence. The implications of this revelation settled over the Council like a heavy shroud. The Korthak Dominion's entire expansion strategy was based on identifying weak targets and overwhelming them with superior force. If humanity could make itself appear weak while actually possessing overwhelming strength, then every intelligence assessment the Dominion had ever made was potentially compromised. What do the humans want from us? Supreme Admiral Vexkoth asked quietly. They want a non-aggression pact and formal recognition of their territorial boundaries, Zektar replied. In exchange, they are offering something unprecedented, which is alliance. The humans are willing to share defensive technologies with species that agree to peaceful coexistence. Not weapons technology, defensive systems only. Shield upgrades, sensor networks, early warning systems. The chamber fell silent as the Council absorbed this offer. The Korthak had spent centuries building their empire through conquest, accumulating territories and resources through military force. The humans were offering to simply give away advanced technology in exchange for peace. Why would they do this? Counselor Thexara asked suspiciously. Because they have calculated that a galaxy full of well-defended peaceful species is more stable than a galaxy full of aggressive empires competing for resources, Zektar explained. The humans think in terms of centuries, not decades. They are not trying to win the next war. They are trying to prevent all future wars. General Kethavar leaned back in his chair, his aggressive posture deflating. Admiral, in your professional opinion, what would be the outcome if the Dominion chose to continue hostile operations against human space? Zektar met the general's gaze directly. Complete annihilation of the Korthak military within 6 months, followed by occupation of our homeworld and dissolution of the Dominion as a political entity. And if we accept their terms? Peaceful coexistence, technology sharing, and the possibility of becoming part of the most stable and prosperous region of the galaxy. Supreme Admiral Vexkoth stared at the tactical displays showing the true scope of human capabilities. After a long moment, he spoke with the weight of historical decision. The Korthak Dominion has built its identity on military supremacy and territorial expansion. What you are asking us to do is abandon everything we have been for the past 3 centuries. Yes, Zektar agreed, but the alternative is extinction. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. For the first time in their recorded history, the Korthak Dominion would choose peace over war, cooperation over conquest. As the council session ended and the historical implications of their decision began to sink in, Supreme Admiral Vexkoth approached Zektar privately. Admiral, he said quietly, do you believe the humans will honor their commitments to us? Zektar considered the question carefully. Supreme Admiral, in my 6 months among them, I observed something remarkable. The humans are not just militarily superior. They are morally superior. They kept their word to us even when they had every reason not to. They treated defeated enemies with more respect than we have ever shown conquered allies. And what does that mean for the future of the galaxy? It means, Zektar replied, that the age of conquest is over. The humans have made it obsolete. The future belongs to species that can adapt to cooperation rather than competition. As Zektar left the Grand Chamber, he reflected on the irony of the situation. The Korthak had attempted to conquer humanity because they appeared weak. In defeat, they had discovered that true strength lay not in the ability to dominate others, but in the wisdom to make domination